I understand this morning, I didn't text you, but producers did, that you are fired up about this particular story, this indictment. What say you? Good morning. Thanks for joining.
Good morning, Don. Yeah, I'm energized. Yes, I'm angry, but boy, am I energized. And I think this is sort of a Jimmy Kimmel-esque miscalculation by Donald Trump's dirty Department of Justice. Just as we saw him try to permanently remove Jimmy Kimmel from the airwaves, that failed spectacularly. That awakened the sleeping giant, at least in part. Jimmy Kimmel has won. He's back on air. He is stronger than ever, getting bigger numbers than ever, funny as ever. What does that do? It exposes Donald Trump for the paper tiger he is. He couldn't even keep Jimmy Kimmel off the air. Now he has done something that I don't want to say is much worse, but to this old 30-year career prosecutor, this is depravity at the Department of Justice. He has taken a case that, by all accounts, every respectable prosecutor who looked at it says, we don't have it. We don't even have probable cause that James Comey lied to Congress, never mind proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And the Trump-installed prior U.S. Attorney Eric Siebert, well regarded in that office, has been a federal prosecutor for 2010. He resigned basically in protest. We know what he did. And the reporting, Don, was when he announced to his troops, his employees, he was resigning. There were lots of tears in the audience because of how well regarded an interim U.S. attorney he was. And I've worked with the Alexandria U.S. Attorney's Office tons over my decades as a federal prosecutor right across the river at the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office. I had lots of cases, defendants and cooperating witnesses in common with my colleagues at the Eastern District of Virginia U.S. Attorney's Office. Then a bunch of the line prosecutors, the rank and file, the people who actually go into grand juries and courts and indict and try cases, drafted a memo. We call it a declination memo, setting out why we don't have it. We can't indict Jim Comey for anything. That memo was sent up the chain. I am sure Lindsay Halligan got her hands on that memo. And yet this new U.S. attorney, Lindsay Halligan, who was an insurance lawyer, who was a beauty pageant contestant a couple of times over, and who was in charge of basically scrubbing facts from and whitewashing history at the Smithsonian Museums. That was one of her assigned duties at the White House. Donald Trump knew she was a flunky and would do his unlawful and unconstitutional and corrupt bidding.
Everyone he appoints, they know that.
Exactly. Only the best people, Don, right?
Yeah.
And so,
Glenn, stand by, because I just want to introduce someone. I will let you finish. I'm going to bring in now Dina Doll. Hello, good morning, Dina Doll. So glad that you're here. Dina Doll is an attorney, a legal analyst, and a host on the MeidasTouch network. Dina, we'll bring you in a moment. Glenn is finishing up his statement, but I saw you in the waiting room, and I wanted to make sure we got you on so the audience would know that you're here. Glenn, I'm sorry for interrupting. Go ahead, continue.
No worries. Good to be with you, Dina. So, so now he finds his flunky, right? He finds his lapdog. He finds his sycophant in Lindsay Halligan. She goes over, and within days of being sworn in as acting U.S. attorney, interim U.S. attorney at the Virginia office, she signs off on an indictment. I heard my friend Barbara McQuaid, who was a U.S. attorney for years out in Michigan, say as U.S. attorney, she never once signed an indictment. That was my experience, Don. We, the line prosecutors and the supervisors in the U.S. attorney's office, sign indictments on behalf of the United States attorney. The fact that she signed this personally tells me that I'll bet she couldn't find an honest, ethical assistant United States attorney in that office to go in, obtain this lawless indictment. We can talk about why I believe it's lawless, but so she is now on the hook, and I think she's going to go. Don, I don't want to jump ahead of where we are, but she's going to go the way of Rudy Giuliani and Kenneth Chesborough and Jeffrey Clark and John Eastman. These people are either disbarred or pending disbarment because they did Donald Trump's lawless, corrupt bidding. Lindsay Halligan is the one who's up at bat presently, and this case will go down in flames, both because it's a vindictive prosecution and because they can't make out the elements of a false statements to Congress, a 1001 violation, or obstructing a congressional inquiry. I can't wait to be sitting in that courtroom in Alexandria, Virginia, covering every minute of this trial.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. And I want both of you to watch this. Dina, I want you to respond. This is just real quick. I just want the beginning of this. This is Ellie Honig on CNN saying what most people said when they saw this, like the old saying is, where's the rest of it? Here it is.
I've looked at this indictment. It took me about 30 seconds to read it. I mean, it's a page and a couple lines, and I find it deeply underwhelming in terms of what it presents. When your producer handed it to me, I said, well, where's the indictment? I thought this was just a cover sheet. This is the whole thing. Let me try to lay out the facts that led to this indictment, because it gets a little confusing.
Ellie thought it was just a cover sheet. So, I mean, how thin is this, Dina?
Yeah, it's just a few paragraphs. Very, very thin. Yeah, I think Glenn made excellent points. I mean, the fact is, who knows if this thing is even actually going to get to a trial? It could get dismissed outright. The fact that there was this memo, that said that there wasn't enough evidence to even get a grand jury indictment, it may not even get past that initial step. And I think that Glenn's point is so right about, why nobody else signed it. There's such a thing as prosecutorial misconduct. I think we always are worried about Trump taking too much power. And I think that him trying to bring his kind of vendetta into the criminal justice system is perfect, because we have so many checks and balances for a criminal defendant in this country. Our founders drafted it that way. You don't even have to worry about what judge you select. If you go to trial, you have a jury of your peers. Trump is not going to be able to get what he wants because of the protections we actually have in this country for criminal defendants.
Mm-hmm. This is Donald Trump. I mean, this is the quiet part out loud. A couple of things here. Number one, he tweeted something out, or Truth Social did, or whatever, that folks thought either it was supposed to be a text message or a DM, but basically instructing Pam Bondi to do it. You say, I have reviewed over 30 statements and posts saying that essentially same old story as last time, all talk, no action, nothing is being done. What about Comey, Adam Shifty Schiff, Letitia? This man is sick.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This man is sick. But then he says at other times, I don't have any involvement. I don't know anything about these. There's a soundbite where he says that as much. Here it is.
Mr. President, it seems like an indictment of James Comey is imminent. Would this be the first step in accountability for pushing the hoax of Russia, along with Barack Obama involved as well?
Well, I can't tell you what's going to happen because I don't know. You have very professional people headed up by the Attorney General and Todd Blanche and Lindsay Halligan, who's very smart, good lawyer, very good lawyer. They're going to make a determination. I'm not making that determination. I think I'd be allowed to get involved if I want, but I don't really choose to do so. I can only say that Comey's a bad person. He's a sick person. I think he's a sick guy, actually. He did terrible things at the FBI. But I don't know. I have no idea what's going to happen. Thank you.
All right. He has no idea what's going to happen. But then in the thing, you see him instructing Pam Bondi to do it. And then there's one more I want to play for you guys because I want to get you all teed up here. Is Donald Trump saying, oh, we've got to act fast on this. Here it is.
No, I just want people to act. They have to act. And we want to act fast. They were ruthless and vicious. I was impeached twice. I was indicted 5 times. It turned out to be a fake deal. And we have to act fast, one way or the other, one way or the other. They're guilty, they're not guilty, we have to act fast. If they're not guilty, that's fine. If they are guilty or if they should be charged, they should be charged. And we have to do it now.
What's the point here? He's contradicting himself. He's lying. He's got to act fast. The statute of limitations, I don't know. There's someone saying that the statute of limitations was up. The other one is like, it's going to be up on Tuesday. So he's clearly lying here because he's saying, Pam, you got to do something.
His words are the best thing for Comey. If I were Comey, I'd be like, just keep talking. I think he said something again this morning about revenge. this is a gold mine. You know, Comey, if he ends up at trial or even before trying to get this dismissed, to show that this is a pretext. This is a political persecution. This isn't about any statements I may or may not have made. Right there, even Trump talked about his guilt. Then you got to go after him because of the guilt. We are not guilty until we are proven guilty at trial. Everything Trump says is actually very helpful for Comey as now, like a defendant in the criminal justice system. We have so many more protections in that justice system than when Trump just lies and he seems like he doesn't get away with it and there's no repercussions. His statements have repercussions, and Comey will use it to his benefit.
She mentioned this morning. Dina mentioned, Glenn, this morning, that Donald Trump said something. There's a new statement from him. I'm gonna play it, and then this is time for you to respond. Here it is.
I'm James Comey. Now that James Comey has been indicted, who is the next person on your list in this retribution?
It's not a list, but I think there'll be others. I mean, they're corrupt. These were corrupt, radical left Democrats, because Comey essentially was he's worse than a Democrat. I would say the Democrats are better than Comey. But no, there'll be others. Look, that's my opinion.
We are living inside of this man's mental issues. We're victims of what's going on in his head, Glenn.
Yeah, Don, this is going to be the most compelling vindictive prosecution defense ever been mounted in the history of the United States courts. That is not hyperbole. And it's because of everything that you have pointed out, Dina's been commenting on. Usually, Don, I taught for years at GW, both law school and undergrad, and I would teach the doctrines of selective prosecution and vindictive prosecution. Usually what is so difficult for defendants to do when they raise those defenses in pretrial motions and at trial is to get any admissible evidence of, proving that government officials were acting vindictively or selectively. Here, we have such an embarrassment of riches, of admissible evidence out of Donald Trump's mouth, and as a result of Donald Trump's posts, that this is a vindictive and selective prosecution. The post that you mentioned a minute ago, Don, there are 3 distinct admissible pieces of evidence that will support James Comey's vindictive prosecution claim, motion to dismiss with prejudice. Here they are. You mentioned the first. First of all, I don't believe for a minute Donald Trump intended this for public consumption, because he opens it by saying, Pam, I have some things I want to tell Pam. You're not posting that for the general public, specifically when he goes on to say that his administration, their reputation and their credibility is being killed by this. Donald Trump doesn't talk publicly about his reputation and his administration's credibility being killed. That he never admits weakness, right? So here are the 3 distinct pieces of admissible evidence that will help prove vindictive prosecution. The first is what you mentioned. He uses as a reason to indict James Comey the fact that he is reading social media posts that say, same old story as last time, all talk, no action, nothing's being done. What about Comey? They're all guilty as hell. Don, it's not a reason to indict or prosecute somebody because you're being criticized on social media as being weak. No, that supports a claim that you're vindictively prosecuting somebody. The second, we can't delay any longer. It's killing our reputation and credibility. You don't bring criminal charges or indictments because your reputation and credibility is being tarnished. You bring it because the facts and the law support it, which they don't here. And the third is he says, look, they impeached me twice and indicted me 5 times. Again, you don't bring charges against somebody because you were indicted for your crimes. That is not a reason to charge somebody else. It's based on the facts and the law. This is going to be such a robust vindictive and selective prosecution claim that it will probably not make it to the jury. It will be dismissed on that ground early on, but if it makes it to the jury, and I don't want to say I hope it does, because James Comey and his family are going to go through hell now, financially, reputationally, sleepless nights, anxiety, all of that, and nobody should have to endure that. But if it makes it to a jury, I predict that jury will acquit, will find not guilty James Comey, before they have time to have a cup of coffee in the deliberation room. kind of just as Donald Trump was convicted in a New York minute up in New York for his 34 felony crimes, because this is clearly not a prosecution that is supported by the facts. And we haven't even talked about why this is not a false statement to Congress in violation of 18 U.S.C. 1001, which is kind of a kissing cousin crime to perjury. It's a lot like perjury.
Oh, we're gonna get to that. I'm saving the best for last, but I also want to put this up because also more evidence that can be used in in the vein of what you're saying, Glenn. And this is the president tweeting and celebrating what happened with James Comey. Justice in America, he says. One of the worst human beings this country has ever been exposed to is James Comey, the former corrupt head of the FBI. Today, he was indicted by a grand jury on 2 felony counts for various illegal and unlawful acts. He has been so bad for our country for so long and is now at the beginning of being held responsible for his crimes against our nation. Make America great again. But what are the crimes? And again, is this more evidence of selective prosecution, that he is now gleeful about someone who has not even been proven guilty? Or do you understand what I'm saying, Dina?
Yes. I mean, he can't help himself. He is all about trying to take credit for things. He's all about just hate, as he kind of said not that long ago in that rally. And it's just so perfect, I think, because, our founders were worried about, the federal government always has so much power. If you're ever in the criminal defense, a criminal defendant in this country, the stakes are already so mismatched. They have the law enforcement who does the investigation. They have career prosecutors. And yes, you can get appointed a criminal defense lawyer, but the stakes are so mismatched. And so they have built in so many checks to try to even that. And it's just the irony of this is exactly when we need those checks. When you literally have the president of the United States, who's not even a part of, obviously, of the DOJ, but not even a lawyer, trying to go out there and say if somebody has legal, liability, in this case, criminal liability for something, is nonsense. But it shows he's trying to use the power of the full government. No other single office is as powerful as the president. He's trying to use that incredibly powerful office against a person in the United States. And kind of like Jimmy Kimmel, the free speech argument wasn't just about Jimmy Kimmel. This is obviously not just about James Comey. We know he's instructed the DOJ to try to denaturalize citizens based on very innocuous things, which would require those people to go through the court system and defend their citizenship. Comey is going to have some great lawyers around him, right? His daughter was just recently fired from the DOJ, just like Jimmy Kimmel could stand up to Trump pretty well. But the rest of us, and a lot of people in America will have a harder time defending themselves against this really corrupt DOJ that Trump is trying to weaponize. So for all of us sitting here watching this, good for Comey, take this as far and fight this as much, because he needs to do that for the rest of us too.
Yeah. I want you all to stand by. I want to show folks who are here. We have an incredible group of legal minds with us. We have Dina Doll from the MeidasTouch Network. We have Glenn Kirschner, independent journalist Glenn Kirschner, who is the host of the Justice Matters with Glenn Kirschner podcast. And also joining us, Katie Phang is an attorney, a legal analyst, and the host of the Katie Phang Show right here on YouTube. I want to play something, and I want you guys to react to it, because what folks are saying about this, it's really outrageous. We have the folks who are on, you would say in sort of the middle ground. Some folks may say that they're left, responding to this. I played Ellie Honig earlier. I'm going to play what one politician is saying about this. This is Dan Goldman. Dan Goldman is saying this is a break point here. I want to see if you agree to that. Here it is.
Congressman, how do you see this?
There's so many different directions to go towards. It is fundamentally a break point in our system of government.
A break point.
And the reason is the United States, for its entire history, has gone around the world promoting anti-corruption, promoting democracy. And the number one thing that our government insists upon in any other country that wants to be democratic, wants to get our support, is that the leaders do not use the criminal justice system to retaliate or to go after their political adversaries.
Okay, pause it there. All right. And then this is Senator Richard Blumenthal saying this is a dark day for America.
My reaction is it is a sad, dark, really scary day for America. Donald Trump directly singled out James Comey, a critic and political adversary, for charges that seem to be unfounded. Remember, a career prosecutor resigned rather than bring them, and only because Donald Trump appointed his personal lawyer to be the U.S. attorney are these charges going forward. And I think we all ought to be frightened today, because if Donald Trump can populate the Department of Justice with federal prosecutors throughout the country, nobody is safe. If some U.S. attorney in Topeka wants to go after a local businessman or a public official, this indictment says you can do retribution.
This is from, these are the politicians. That's what they're saying. Senator Blumenthal and Representative Goldman. Katie Phang, this opens a Pandora's box.
Well, yeah, and I actually think that's a very mellow way of describing what's happening, Don. It's truly a break glass moment. Like I was just talking to somebody how we always use this phrase, we've crossed the Rubicon. Well, we've not only crossed the Rubicon, we're in an entirely other fucking country now, because this is the type of country now where an American president, and a president, period, can weaponize a federal arm to be able to prosecute his political enemies. And look, if you want to sue somebody civilly, that's a pain in the ass and horrible, and that's whatever, that's one thing. But criminal prosecution is next level shit. Anybody who's ever had to go through the criminal justice system on the criminal defendant end knows how difficult it is to navigate. And given Comey has the privilege of money and means and position to be able to fight this and fight this well. He has Pat Fitzgerald in his corner, the longest serving U.S. attorney in Chicago, and one of the most skilled litigators you could ever have in your corner. But this is one of those moments in time where we have to gut check ourselves and say, is this really the country that we want to be living in? Where somebody can do this, where you can literally go after your political enemies by handpicking somebody to be in a role to pursue it. The thing that I just don't get, Don, is this. She just got sworn in. This Lindsay Halligan chick just gets sworn in, 72 hours ago? Not even. She herself does the rare move of presenting to the grand jury, not some line prosecutor, but her. We, of course, don't have the benefit of knowing the presentation that was done, but then she can get an indictment with term within hours. And yet this freaking DOJ can't release the Epstein files? I'm not quite sure why they can't walk and chew gum at the same time. Can't you release the Epstein files and prosecute your political enemies? No, we can't do that. We can only do the political enemies prosecution, which is not only illegal and unconstitutional, but it sets the wrong precedent. Because I'm going to say this loud and clear. Trump will not have a third term. Republicans will not have the trifecta of power of the House, Senate, and the Oval Office forever. And when it comes to accountability and a day of reckoning, they better be watching themselves, because it's going to happen.
Now for the pundits. Miles Taylor on CNN saying this is an impeachable offense.
There are sources inside the administration saying that they are looking to bring that case to placate the president, not to make sure that justice is upheld, not because there was an initial predicate and evidence of a crime, but because they need to satiate the president's desire for revenge. This, Omar, is why I believe this is a constitutional crisis. This is why I believe what we are watching today is an impeachable offense.
Okay, great, right there. So who wants to weigh in on that? Is he right? Okay, the floor is open.
Glenn did it. Glenn, you go, man. Because last night, Dawn, Glenn and I were reacting in real time right after the indictment was unsealed. And Glenn said it. Go, Glenn. High crime and misdemeanor. Let's roll, man. Let's go.
Yeah. The answer would be yes. I mean, this is the most extreme abuse of Department of Justice power by a president, I believe, in our nation's history. As Katie said, he took a flunky who had no prosecutorial experience, no business setting 1 foot inside a grand jury room, never mind both feet, and arguing in favor of an indictment. He took that flunky and he communicated to her in substance, evidence be damned. Go in there and indict my political opponent when no other self-respecting, experienced federal prosecutor or U.S. attorney, including one appointed by Donald Trump himself, would do. This is high crimes and misdemeanors, bigly, as Donald Trump would say. And if we ever get a functioning Congress again, and we will, I'm with Katie, there may be a rapture coming, but it's a rule of law rapture. And the rule of law will be applied to what these people do. And you know what we're going to do, Don? Because I hope someday to go back to government. We will give everybody their due process rights, and we will not bring evidence-free, baseless, bogus, vindictive prosecutions because one, we don't do it, and two, we won't have to, because the crimes that have been committed by Trump and company will keep federal prosecutors busy for the next decade.
I am pleasantly surprised by this next reaction because this is on Fox News. Now, I want you to, Maria Bartiromo tries everything within her power to turn this nothing burger into a something burger. She's trying to take the no meat burger and make it into meat. It's just not going to happen. But this is Andrew McCarthy, a conservative. This is what he had to say about he keeps shooting her down. Here it is.
I want to hear this one.
First, give us your reaction to the indictment.
Well, I don't think there's a case. The things that Kash Patel that you just played that he was talking about that you and I have spoken about for years, Maria, the Russiagate stuff, I'm as big a critic of that probably as there is. I wrote a book about it. I think it was a disgrace, and history will remember it that way. This indictment is not about that, and it seems to be premised on something that's not true, which is that McCabe said that Comey authorized him to leak to the Wall Street Journal. If you look closely at what McCabe said was that he directed a leak to the Wall Street Journal and told Comey about it after the fact. So it's true that Comey never authorized it in the sense of okaying it before it happened. So I don't see how they can make that case.
Yeah. She's going to try here. Watch. She's going to try right here. She's trying her darndest. Here it is.
The leaking in general. I mean, what about leaking a story that they may have known was a lie to the media? Because if you're the director of the FBI, you need the evidence to say, yeah, I mean, for years, congressmen and lawmakers were trying to understand, Devin Nunes, John Ratcliffe, trying to understand what's the origins of this investigation. So what was the origins of Russia collusion with Trump? And so they never really had any evidence of it, but they leaked it to the press?
Yeah, but that's not what this case is about. I totally agree with you if you were talking about the information that was provided to the FISA court that claimed that Trump was in collusion with the Kremlin. But that's not what this case is about. What this case is about is Comey is accused of lying because what Ted Cruz said, and this, and what Cruz said, and I think this was just a garble on his part, was that Comey authorized McCabe to orchestrate the leak. And what the Inspector General found, and this isn't even just what the Inspector General found, this is McCabe's own version of events. Right. McCabe said that he directed the leak and he told Comey about it afterwards. Now, they have a dispute about what exactly McCabe told Comey afterwards and whether Comey was approving or disapproving of it. But the charge is that Comey authorized the leak, and he didn't authorize the leak.
I see. Well,
okay. All
right.
I see.
Dina, you want to weigh in?
I mean, I think it just goes to our earlier point that this may very well just get dismissed and, not go on from there, because we actually have real checks and balances in the criminal justice system that, as much as Trump wants to get around, he can't. They have to actually prove things. And this is why nobody else was willing to sign the indictment. And she may lose her law license. over this. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes justice is slow and we can get really frustrated about it, right? Jeffrey Clark just lost his law license very recently, having to do with what he did in 2020. But people do end up, the lower people at least, right? The actual attorneys whose name is on the indictment, they do end up suffering consequences as a result of that. And I think she will, and I think Comey's going to win, and maybe sooner than we think.
Glenn, what was it? Was it the Durham report that turned up nothing? This is a la Durham report. And what do you think of what McCarthy said? I mean, I wonder if he's going to now want to take Maria Bartiromo off the air for airing that segment.
Yeah. So yeah, Maria Bartiromo would not do very well in a court of law because she just did the kind of whataboutism. Perjury is a very exacting offense, and there are elements, and the prosecution must prove each element beyond a reasonable doubt. And when Bartiromo's like, yeah, well, what about how bad the Trump-Russia investigation was? That's not an argument that you can make in a court of law when the evidence fails even on a single element. And the reason the evidence failed, I mentioned earlier, and I'm glad you said you were going to get to it, the evidence will not support a 1001 false statements to Congress charge, because when you listen to Ted Cruz question Comey in 2020, which frankly was a dirty attempt to try to freshen up alleged perjury from 2016 that had already expired, courtesy of the statute of limitations. I urge people to listen to it. It gets a little down in the legal weeds, but Ted Cruz is like, yeah, well, you authorized the leak because Andy McCabe said, and what was James Comey's answer? I'm not going to comment on what Andy McCabe says, but my testimony remains the same. In other words, it remains consistent with what I told you clowns years ago. He didn't say clowns. That was my editorial addition. What he did made him perjury proof, because all he did was he didn't answer Ted Cruz's question. So there will be no support for an assertion that he perjured himself in 2020, which was within 3 days of the expiration of the statute. All he did was refer them back. And he said, I stick with my original. This perjury case, one, it's vindictive, and there will be a motion to dismiss with prejudice based on vindictive prosecution.
So how far will this go?
That's a great question.
All right, tell me number two, but and then answer.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
So number two is that they won't be able to prove the elements, and so that would result in a dismissal right at the conclusion of the government's case in chief. When the government rests, the defendant will stand up and say, we move for a judgment of acquittal because the prosecution failed to present evidence on each element of the charged offense, and it will be dismissed at that point. But I don't think it'll make it that far. I think it will probably be dismissed on vindictive prosecution in the early stages when they're litigating the pretrial motions in this case.
Katie, you think it'll make it that far? You agree with Glenn? I just don't. I think it's, look, I think the point is, you know what the point is? David Frum, and then I'll follow up on this. Is what David from the Atlantic said.
Sure.
This is not just a backward-looking prosecution against the president's past enemies. This is a declaration that the president and one of his most important aides, Stephen Miller, has made this point also explicitly, intends to act in the future to use the prosecution mechanism to pervert the 2026 elections, break up Democratic Party fundraising. That's why you go after Reid Hoffman. That's why you go after the Soros family. They're important Democratic donors. Stop them, intimidate, and maybe even if you don't stop them, intimidate them, frighten them, warn them that there could be a prosecution in your future if you give money to my opponents. So President Trump is playing for all the marbles here.
He is. That's why he's trying to go after the NGOs, right, Don? That's why he's now making that dumb executive order. Antifa is a domestic terrorist organization. But if you provide support or you act on behalf of, and it's vague, right? The language is intentionally vague in that executive order. It is consistent with the hallmark of this administration, which is a campaign of intimidation and fear. It is the oppression of political opponents and perceived political enemies. And that is why the weaponization of a Department of Justice in a criminal prosecution sense is the most profound assault on our American democracy that you can have. But I don't even think we're going to get to a jury trial in this case, even though James Comey himself said, bring it on. I think you're going to see one of the most exceptional motions to dismiss that Glenn has mentioned on vindictive prosecution. And let's backtrack for just a hot second. You have to have a judge presiding over this case. By all accounts, I have spoken to several lawyers who know this judge. This is a good judge to have drawn in random assignment in the EDVA. So not only do you have a rocket docket where you could be going to trial or to some type of conclusion in 30 days, right? But you also have judges, which I'm going to remind everybody, when Eric Siebert was the interim U.S. attorney, at the expiration of his 120 days, he could have been booted like Alina Habba because nobody the hell wanted her in New Jersey. All the judges are like, nope, sorry, don't want her. But unanimously, all of the judges in the Eastern District of Virginia said, we want Eric to stay. And it was only after he was forced out because Trump was trying to make him do something illegal and unethical that he was gone. Can you imagine the judge that gets this case?
Yeah.
Is going to say, the hell with this. We know exactly where this case is coming from.
Well, Katie, look, I'm sure you remember my colleague back in the day during the first Trump term, Andy McCabe, was targeted by Donald Trump. I watched Andy lose at least 20 pounds in real, in real life. I watched him do it. And then all of a sudden he was, the case went away. But the point was to embarrass, to intimidate, to make one's life, to wreak havoc in one's life, and also even possibly to bankrupt, right?
Yes,
because you have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend yourself. And then the constant barrage of negativity and the president, saying negative things about you, having to deal with the attorneys and all of that, that takes a toll. And that is the point, I believe, from the Trump folks.
And that's why that saying in Italian or Latin, don't let the bastards grind you down. That's what we have to remember, because we've all been through stuff in our lives where the goal singularly on the other side was to grind you down so finely that you couldn't get up. And that is why in this moment, your program is so important and independent media is so important, because you're not going to get that sense of exigency and urgency in mainstream media anymore. You're not going to get that. That is why we have to rely upon ourselves to be together, to be able to fight back and to speak up, because this is not going to stop with James Comey. Mark my words, Tish James will be looking at an indictment in the next couple of weeks, if that long. Adam Schiff will probably be looking at an indictment in a couple of weeks, if not that long. We know that the EDVA, the line prosecutor, said there's just nothing there, folks. But that's not going to stop them, obviously, when Trump is empowered and Pamela Joe lets him get away with it, where he can handpick lackeys to go in and bring these types of charges against people. And so that's why we have to be standing alert and ready to fight back.
This is a little over a year ago on this very program, James Comey appeared, and I asked him what his biggest fear was in relation to Donald Trump. What is your biggest fear if he wins come November?
That he will be smarter and more determined and surrounded by even worse people than the last time. And there were some bad people, but even those bad people want no part of it. So we're going another few inches closer to the bottom of the barrel.
The last time was a dress rehearsal, you believe?
I do think it's a dress rehearsal. I mean, he's, again, believe your ears when Donald Trump tells you this, I'll be the retribution president. He's going to try to burn it all down. And that's, I realize a lot of people think, oh, it's entertaining. I'd like to see someone take on the elites. This isn't about that. This is about what are we as a country, and do we maintain a constitution and a rule of law? That's what this is about.
And this is James Comey last night.
My family and I have known for years that there are costs to standing up to Donald Trump, but we couldn't imagine ourselves living any other way. We will not live on our knees, and you shouldn't either. Somebody that I love dearly recently said that fear is the tool of a tyrant, and she's right. But I'm not afraid, and I hope you're not either. I hope instead you are engaged, you are paying attention, and you will vote like your beloved country depends upon it, which it does. My heart is broken for the Department of Justice, but I have great confidence in the federal judicial system, and I'm innocent. So let's have a trial and keep the faith.
Last words, Dina?
Yeah, I mean, I think months ago when the big law firms capitulated, I don't know how much news it really made outside of like the legal community in our communities, but this was why we were so upset, because if every group capitulates, right? The business group, the lawyers, allies, then the rest of us, the normal people in this country, have no hope. So Comey here, he is going to stand up for himself. But this needs to be a wake-up call that any business, even our allies, anybody who even considers capitulating now in the face of Trump's threats, you have to stand up for him, because he's taking this to the next level. As Katie has said, the criminal justice is a whole other level, but we have been warned, and people and companies have been capitulating, and that has to stop for us to have any hope to get victory a year from now. A year is a very long time. I think the Democrats will take back Congress, but it is a very long time. A lot of damage can be done if people aren't willing to stand up to them.
Katie has to go. Katie, final words.
Yeah, really quickly. Think about the last thing that James Comey just said in his video. Let's have a trial and keep the faith. What does it tell you that a man who has been under attack by Trump and his MAGA cult for so long still maintains a belief in the faith, in the integrity of the judicial system to still do right by him? And the fact that he says to keep the faith, and he tells us that we have to vote the right way. This is somebody that, I'm sorry, this is not the time to relitigate whether you approve or disapprove of what happened in 2016 with him. That is not the point of this. He should be held up as an example of how absolutely wrong things can go if somebody like Trump is not held to account for abusing power in this way. If James Comey can make that statement and do it clear-eyed the way that he just did, then we don't have an excuse, to Dina's point, to stand on the sidelines and to not speak up and speak out.
Katie Phang is an attorney, a legal analyst, and the host of the Katie Phang Show here on YouTube, powered by the MeidasTouch. Thank you, Katie. I know that you have to go. We appreciate it. I'll see you soon, my friend. Glenn, final words.
Yeah, I want to follow up on what both Katie and Dina said. First of all, I agree with Katie. You're not going to hear this sense of urgency on corporate media and legacy media. Independent media, independent journalism, as what you're doing, what Dina's doing, what I have decided to do when I asked to be released from my MSNBC contract, is the wave of the present, not just the wave of the future. And what we need, because I think we have come to realize that no one person will save us, right? No prosecutor will save us, no special counsel, no judge, and no politician. If the politicians could have saved us, they would have saved us already. They can't. It's up to us. And you know what we need? We now need to band together to galvanize, one, as a legal community. We need a legal community NATO, right? We need our own little Article 5, all for one and one for all. Yes, I just mixed the NATO charter with, I think, the Three Musketeers, but still, we need a legal community NATO. We need a nonprofit NATO. We need a college and university NATO. We need a news outlet NATO, because when the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal talk about being on opposite ends of the ideological spectrum, when they both fight Donald Trump, they win, right? We all need to band together, support one another, and fight the monster, not feed the monster. We need a law firm NATO, because the law firms that fought Donald Trump won hands down in court. And the ones that bent the knee and gave their lunch money to the bully without a fight, they are still giving their lunch money to the bully, and the bully wants more. The monster is never satisfied when you feed him. He wants more. You have to starve the monster. You have to fight the monster, always peacefully. And we don't say that as a punchline. We say it because we mean it, always peacefully. But we now need to band together, all of us, and stand up to Donald Trump, because he's a paper tiger. He was a paper tiger in the Jimmy Kimmel incident, and he will be proved a paper tiger when he has his flunkies bring corrupt indictments, because they will fail spectacularly, and that will weaken Donald Trump even further. But it's up to us, Don, to band together, create our own NATO across all disciplines, and we can win this thing. We can win this thing.
Glenn Kirschner, thank you. Glenn Kirschner is an American attorney, a former U.S. Army prosecutor, a former assistant U.S. attorney in the Office of the United States Attorney for the District of Columbia. And as he said, a voluntarily former NBC News and MSNBC legal analyst. He did that because he wanted to go independent so that he could host the Justice Matters with Glenn Kirschner podcast. So make sure you subscribe to that, become a member, support independent media. Dina Doll is an attorney, a legal analyst, and the host of On the MeidasTouch Network. Make sure you support Dina, check her out, and support our friends over at MeidasTouch as well. We're all independent media, independent journalists out here, as Glenn said, fighting the good fight. Thank you for your support. Glenn and Dina, thank you for appearing, and I'll see you guys soon, okay? Have a great weekend. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Your support means the world to us. So make sure you hit the like button and you subscribe to our channel to make sure that you never, ever miss a video. We're live every day, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We drop even more content at 2 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Eastern. And if you want more Don Lemon Show content, we'd love for you to become a member of the Lemon community, where you will receive access to special community posts. You'll get exclusive content and members-only live shows. So head over to our channel page or click the join button on this video. Again, thank you for watching. We appreciate your love and your support, and we will see you next time.